Will democracy survive? Will it withstand the surge of populism, growing immigration, rising nationalism, inequalities and disinformation? Quite a poisonous cocktail for a project that's been a political and social engine in Europe and beyond. What went wrong? And will democracy rise stronger? Questions that matter and ideas that shape the future. It's TVP World, Warsaw Debate. Welcome to our studio. I'm Grzegorz Nawrocki and co-hosting the show with me, Małgorzata Bonikowska from the Center of International Relations.
Good evening. The West is at the crossroads, with history speeding up, the concert of superpowers accelerating, such as China, and dynamic growth of anti-system and xenophobic parties all across the continent.
And the open question is, are we heading for an iceberg or gearing up to use the crisis as a new engine for progress? The faith in democracy is fading. Extreme ideas in politics are becoming mainstream. People just seem to be fed up and want something else, something new.
Indeed. Is this just a patch of turbulence for Europe? Or it's a new world order, post-democratic world order in the making?
Yeah, still an open question.
Are we witnessing the twilight of democracy, marking the possible end of a historical era? Democracy is a European invention. It was first implemented in ancient Greece and reached its peak in 5th century BC Athens. Forgotten for centuries, it reappeared, at least partially, in some medieval European towns, despite the continent being dominated by princely states and monarchies. The rejection of British dominance by the American colonies led to the founding of the first modern republican state, the United States of America, with a constitution that was the first of its kind. After the French Revolution, republican ideas spread further, leading to the decline of absolute monarchies and the rise of representative democracies. While all EU member states and most European countries are formally democratic, the stability and quality of their democratic system can no longer be taken for granted. The rise of the internet and social media has begun to destabilize this picture. Elections are increasingly affected by disinformation and FIMI, foreign information manipulation and interference. At the same time, democracies remain in the global minority. Only 25 out of nearly 200 countries are considered full democracies, and 46 are flawed democracies. Even in countries long seen as pillars of democratic tradition, recent developments have raised concerns about the erosion of institutional checks and balances. In the United States, the steady transfer of legislative powers, such as the authority to impose tariffs, from Congress to the executive branch has triggered debate over the proper limits of presidential power. Similarly, within the European Union, some member states have faced criticism for reforms that appear to concentrate political power and challenge the independence of key institutions. As democratic societies, we take pride in our liberties and freedoms, but we're also increasingly concerned about the stability of our systems. The rapid development of digital technologies and the internet creates opportunities for more direct democracy, reducing the need for traditional representatives. Yet this cannot be achieved if neither the system nor the citizens are ready. Is an authoritarian regime better suited for the challenges of the 21st century, a century of AI, fake news and massive disinformation? Will the West be able to protect its societies against FIMI and other emerging threats? Will democracy prove resilient?
Well, I'm not sure if authoritarian regimes are better at tackling global issues, but I'm pretty sure they are much better at attacking freedoms and exploiting the shortcomings of democratic systems. So are we helpless in confrontation with hungry, let's call it this way, autocracies? Here's Małgorzata Bonikowska with a bit more background on the story.
Yeah, indeed. I hope not. I hope we have still something to do. But let's first look at the map. We've heard in our film that we are in minority. And I just stress, see this blue color, the full democracies in 2024 in the democracy index done by the Economist intelligence unit. It has been 70 years they have been doing that. So it's only 25 countries out of almost 200. And if we add this color, green color, flawed democracies, you can see even the United States are in this category, right? Some countries of Europe, India. Altogether, we are 70 plus out of 200. Not all the countries are in this ranking.
So we are a minority. Are we a shrinking minority?
Well, as far as the countries who are democratic, yes, the number is reduced because some of the flawed democracies transformed in hybrid, like Turkey. So it is a question mark, you know, how to deal with this phenomenon that we are in minority. By population, by the way, it's also less than 50% of the global population who lives in democratic countries, 45% only. The rest, 55, lives or in autocracies or in hybrid regimes.
So what we take for granted here is not really a global standard, in other words.
Exactly. So that's the challenge for democracy, how to handle the 21st century, which is not maybe the best for us. Let's move to the trends now. What are the trends in our democratic societies? Interesting is to observe, you have these two lines. Red line is showing that the trend as far as participating in elections is not to participate so much. So the turnout is shrinking. Of course, it's a generalization. It's about all the democratic countries. So country by country can differ. For example, Scandinavia is working very well. But generally, people go to vote less and less.
In Poland, it's going up, as a matter of fact.
Sometimes mobilization happens, but generally, taking from the 1975, the trend is shrinking, meaning that people don't believe that their vote matters, right? This is the problem. In the same time, the line here, the blue line, shows the percentage of elections which are questioned, meaning the results are there, but the political parties oppose and even the leaders. You remember 2020 when even Donald Trump, the president, was against the results of the election. So, or there are court cases, or the people go on the streets to protest. So they don't agree with the elections results. And the last two trends, let's see other slides. That's very interesting to observe. We have a very good research on the University of Southampton. They are actually doing it from the 50s, but we show from the 90s the data. Here we have the trust to the representative institutions, meaning the politicians, political parties, is shrinking. Everybody who is elected, we don't trust these people. While in the same time, let's see the other slide, the trust to the institutions, you see now non-representative, meaning people who are there for merit.
They're not elected.
They're not elected. We don't vote for them. It's civil service, administration, legal system, the courts, and police. See, the trust is up. What does it mean? Of course, I stress, it's different country by country, but the general trend is that we still trust in our countries, in our governments in a sense of operations, administration, but we don't trust the politicians. Something is wrong here.
Crisis of leadership, is it?
Well, we elect people, then we are not happy with them later.
If I understand it correctly, if democracy wants to survive, it needs to definitely change in some way or another.
It seems like that this model of democracy, which we have now, representative democracy, doesn't work very well because these representatives we select, we are not happy with them later.
All right, thank you very much, Małgorzata. I'm sure we'll come back to this. So are we ready and able, indeed, to use this multi-crisis, or in fact, poly-crisis, with all its consequences, to make democracy stronger, or quite the contrary? Are we seeing the decline, or the death even, of the democratic project? So the motion tonight is democracy is doomed. You're all more than welcome to either agree or disagree with this, with your arguments. And let's hear the speakers tonight at the Warsaw Debate. So For the motion, Professor Wawrzyniec Konarski, Vistula University, political scientist, expert in ethno-politics, Ireland and Polish politics. Welcome to the program, Professor. Against the motion, now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Piotr Arak, Faculty of Economic Sciences at the University of Warsaw, former director of the Polish Economic Institute. Good evening. Nice of you to have joined us. Now, another person for the motion, it's Professor Radosław Markowski, political scientist and sociologist. Please join us, Professor Markowski, Polish Academy of Sciences. Please take your seat. Good evening.
Good evening.
Pleasure to meet you tonight. And last but not least, finally, against the motion, Klaudia Klimek, Director of the European Voting Foundation. Good evening, which works to strengthen direct democracy in Poland and the European Union. Good evening. Nice to meet you. And for the summary of this debate, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be joined by Dr. Ibrahim Öztürk from the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany. Good evening, Dr. Öztürk. It's a pleasure to have you tonight on the show. We'll come back to you when we conclude this debate. So, as usual, at the beginning of this debate, we've just had a vote among the audience here on the motion, and the results are the following: 26% for the motion and 74%, it's easy maths, against the motion. So, time to start with an opening statement from each of our main speakers tonight. It's 2 minutes for an opening speech, and Professor Wawrzyniec Konarski as first, please.
Good night, dear viewers and your listeners. I think some of the signs that democracy is going to have some problems with existence, with this endorsement from the electorate and from the normal citizens, have become to be known already many years ago, when two absolutely important intellectuals have formulated some of the ideas. One was Umberto Eco, another one was our Polish excellent writer Stanisław Lem. Eco has said that, in fact, in the future, democracy will be declining because of the new technologies, because of some involvement of new inventions. And this is, in fact, something which we can observe right now. The similar opinion has been stated before by Stanisław Lem. Today we are having the problem because democracy officially exists, even in the countries which have been mentioned by this introduction to today's our program. But in fact, some of them are hybrid-like political systems, and some of them are absolutely fully autocratic, which means this drifting or this shifting of the democracies into some undemocratic systems is something which is definitely present in our times. What are the results? The results might be quite bad, and also they have so far elaborated some of the names. For instance, one of the well-existing for a long time name is plutocracy. We are having plutocracy, and the plutocratic system at the moment is excellently illustrated by the recent election of Donald Trump and his acolytes. But before, this type of the system used to exist also in Latin America. Latin America has been supported, according to the doctrine of Monroe, for many decades also by the Uncle Sam. Go further. Kleptocracy is also another type of the degenerated democracy, which means democracy which is definitely strongly involved into the issue, yes, I know,
Professor,
of thieves. Okay. And these tendencies, I'm afraid, are at the moment, unfortunately, developing because people, we electors, we the voters, are going to fade away our ambitions.
The rest of your argument in the course of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Wawrzyniec Konarski. And arguments for the opposite side, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Piotr Arak.
Good evening. What I want to say to you and share are both arguments of economic and some political nature on why democracy will survive. Because it stayed alive, survived thousands of years, hundreds of years of crises, wars, the Cold War, authoritarian regimes that shaped a lot of our centuries and shaped a lot of the societies. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First one is democracy is something that people want. We want to have free speech. We want to be able to talk. We want to be able to vote our representatives into office. So this is one of the reasons. The second one is that we have a self-built correction mechanisms, like on the stock exchange. If we don't trust in a stock, we don't trust the board, we can sell the stock and we can vote out any representative that we think fails to represent our interests and our way of thinking. The third reason is that people fight for democracy. On a lot of geographies, in Ukraine, they fight for a different society, and there is no other type of virtue that people are willing to sacrifice their lives for. And the fourth reason, pretty important one, is economic growth. The Nobel Economic Prize in 2024 was given to Doran Acemoglu and Johnson for the research on inclusive institutions. What are there? There are democracies, there are those institutions that help foster economic growth. And throughout the hundreds of years of development, when we analyzed the political economy of institutions, we saw that those economies, those countries that have more inclusive institutions survive, prosper, and have economic prosperity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arak.
We have no growth.
Thank you very much indeed for that. All right. And arguments for the motion will be brought to you by Professor Radosław Markowski. Professor.
Well, I'm really not sure whether this is the motion for, but definitely I would like to say that the picture is very complicated. I'm involved in several current projects on democracy, and it is not black and white picture, it is not a dummy, it is complicated. So first of all, democracies have always been in a sort of state of becoming. Secondly, they have been also, if one wants to see it this way, in a crisis. The new millennium shows us most of the research done on Europeans in particular, that there are different understandings and different expectations towards democracy from the classical liberal package that has always been in place, the famous Schumpeterian idea of what democracy is. It's a minimalist democracy with concerned with the correct procedure of electing and accountability mechanisms. But since then, and especially after the crisis of 2008, it became crystal clear that Europeans expect from democracies also redistributive policies, that is, social democratic visions of democracy. They expect also direct democracy, and interestingly enough, they also claim that populist or popular type of democracy should be considered as important. So, but the real challenge for democracies comes from the fact that democracies, recent problems with democracies, that they erode from the top. Famous topic and famous title of Larry Bertel's book, 2023. Also, the other instance in which we should be very cautious is that we see that in public minds, somehow the separation of powers and the Montesquieu's idea are still valid, but somehow the executive branch seems to be more important than the two other. And finally, there are lots of democratic innovations around. Some of them go back to Florentine experience, Greek experience, and these innovations might sometimes look as if it is a challenge to the existing one we know. But actually, they are very supportive of democracy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of this debate. And finally, Claudia Klimek.
So can a system that was created 2,500 years ago by citizens who wanted to manage a single city can survive in the modern times? Well, democracy was changing throughout the history, and it has to change also right now. Why? Because first of all, people lost faith. they don't believe anymore that their participation, their engagement, bring any kind of a success, especially when the politicians doesn't listen to them outside of the election process. Secondly, the populism. Populism is a byproduct of a democracy, but it's also a poison to it. Populists are giving us very simple answers for very complex questions, and that kills the debate. Thirdly, disinformation, which is targeting the minds of the citizens, but also is flooding the internet. I mean, in the times, in the era where there's a very fast development of a very sophisticated AI, soon we are not going to be able to differentiate what is truth and what is a fiction in the internet. So if you ask me, is liberal democracy in its current form doomed? No, I wouldn't say so. But definitely we all feel intuitively that something has to change, that something has democracy has to upgrade itself to new times, to the new generation. So first of all, we need to think about AI and modern technology. Can it be a potential servant to democracy? We have to think how to engage people one more time so they want to participate in a political and social discussion on a national and local level. And as well, we have to think, where do we want to keep the debate? Because as for now, we use for that social media platforms. But we all know that all your good arguments and all the information that you put there, they are lost amidst the information created by the troll farms. So democracy was created by citizens, for citizens. For sure, it needs to change. And now it's the time for the changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's start this discussion here on the stage, and then we'll open it up to the floor, obviously. Certainly we can see the backsliding of democracies as we know it around the world. In spite of this famous statement by Winston Churchill, I'm sure everybody knows this, is that democracy is the worst form of government except for the others. So I'd like to start this discussion by asking how much of Winston Churchill is right or wrong in 2025?
There is another saying of Winston Churchill, that it's enough 5 minutes to talk to an average person on the street to understand that democracy is a failure.
To lose faith in democracy, yes. All right.
Well, if I may so, I wouldn't say that democracy is a failure, but definitely the communication between politicians and citizens is a failure, especially now when we have a populist on the scene and we see how smart they are sending the messages to the citizens.
But yes, but something wrong is going on. I mean, people are asking questions, really, and these are tough questions. Is democracy in danger, in crisis, or is this simply dying in a way? I know these are strong words, but these are the questions that people are asking themselves.
Well, if I may, so there are some issues with the quality of the life of a lot of Europeans. There are the questions on the inequalities that we face on a global level and the inequalities that we have between regions. And these are causing a lot of people to be fed up with the current situation.
So people who feel poorer, they lose faith in the system, in the democratic system. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if people, even if they're not poor, but if they don't have the same opportunity as they had 20 or 30 years ago, then they might be less believing in the system that prohibits them of going up in the economic ladder. So if we don't have inclusive measures within the market
it's the economy,
system,
basically.
Yeah.
It's the economy.
Yeah. For me, it's a lot of the issues that we have is how much opportunity do we provide to the young people, to the people living in a country, and then the issue stops to be as important. And I mean here with the Western societies, because in Southeast Asia, probably that's...
So that's an economic point of view. Let's talk about politics and sociology. Did you see it this way? That it's the level of poverty, the level of inequalities that's responsible for losing faith in democracy?
The level of inequalities has always been there. Huntington's famous dictum says that, well, it's not only the so-called GDP theory of democracy that says basically that in poor societies, democracies are almost unattainable. But the even more important thing is the inequalities. And it's not only about politics itself, but it also is about social life, cultural, etc. But the world is complex and complicated. It is really enormously troublesome to get to the point and understand the causes, the real causes. If somebody comes and says it's easy, it's simple, just give me the power, it is the first step towards initially populism, later on illiberalism and authoritarianism.
So would you say that democracy is not a proper government system
well, you see,
to deal with
these innovations, they go back to ideas like sortition, demiarchy, demosophia, which says, why not having choose by a lot from competent, meritocratic group of large numbers of people who have passed the test of
it was easy to do it in ancient Greece, where everybody came to agora and just discussed things, and there we go.
Up until it wasn't.
Right, Professor Konarski.
First of all, there are some elements, I think some fields, which definitely show us that democracy is failing. One thing is the participation. Participation is, I'm afraid, not as subjective as it used to be. That's one thing. Second thing is the populism, which has been mentioned by some of us here. Populism, of course, is not a single ideology. It's, in fact, an amalgamation of the ideology, which is going to be very popular right now. Why? Because people don't don't want, of course, to be as subjective as they used to be, as I said.
Right.
And this is absolutely an important danger we are facing right now.
So just to add an additional question, do you think its democratic instruments are proper to solve contemporary complex problems or not? Or perhaps we need a different set of instruments, not democratic ones?
I think we are striving towards the direction that we are very much involved in the, let's say, this kind of the inventions which are quite visible right now, like hyper-progress. I have always been in favor of progress, but not in hyper-progress. But hyper-progress is something which may limit our chances to understand democracy and, of course, to make proper election decisions. This is one thing which you have to know. Let me just add one important issue which has been mentioned by Radosław Markowski before a while, meritocracy. Meritocracy is something which is fading away because we are not having persons who are specially prepared for some of the roles they may play in democracies.
So what is it being substituted by?
Substitute?
Yes.
I mean, first of all, the education is the most important, as Mandela has said once, of course. Education may change everything if education is properly prepared, but I'm afraid today education is, in my mind, of course, not as deep as it used to be. Everything is located in phones or laptops, and also I can see it among my students. They want to, of course, to find all of the knowledge, not in the heads, in the brain, but in the
do you mean that people in the 30s in the United Kingdom were better educated than they are now, and you had better elites in the United Kingdom than you have now?
There was absolutely a different case of the certain presumption, what sort of leaders they may choose. Nowadays, the leaders are definitely more important in the forms, not in the content.
Yeah, but
the content was important
people don't
before.
believe the leaders. Do you remember what Małgorzata Bonikowska just said a second ago? That we really do have a problem with believing our leaders in democracies. That's one of the reasons.
I mean, the belief into the leaders is fading away in an enormous way and very quickly. So I think all of those problems, they have to be taken into consideration as of the compact features we are facing right now.
But if I may jump into now, just wanted to ask you about your opinion about other models of democracy, because representative democracy is a problem, because we don't like those who we vote for. So if not that one, do you see any other model like participative democracy using new technologies? How can new technology repair the system?
We have to, as I said during my presentation, do we really want to conduct the political discussion on like a social media platforms? Maybe we would like to have a direct contact with the politicians. I mean, direct contact.
Like what? Like talking to them online, or?
For example, let's imagine.
Because we do have a lot of direct contact with our politicians at the moment.
But who is listening to you? Do they listen to you? Do they reply? Do they
in the
deliver?
campaign they do, yes.
Yeah, do they deliver? What, you know, I mean, like, there is a vision that we have some kind of a contact, but we don't. We really don't. So maybe there might be some kind of a platform created, even by the government.
So technology would be one of those instruments
Definitely
to bring
technology.
education.
We have the
bring
tool in
democracy.
our hands. You know what I mean? We have the tool. We have to use it. We have to give it to the citizens. But the politicians are not going to do it because it's
Who's going to do
better
it then?
to be
Who's
far
going to do
away
it then?
from the citizens. Better
Academia?
to be here rather than
Academia?
here.
Professors of...
Well,
Go
not
ahead, Prof.
academia, of course. We are not fit for making strict decisions, so that's why Bismarck was clear about it. But let me say something. There is again this idea that we should be more realistic about democracy. First thing is we were in the 60s and later on seduced by Almond's and Verba book, Civic Culture, where, you know, we thought the citizens are waking up in the morning, opening the window and asking a question, what can I do for my country or for my democracy? Bullshit. I mean, it doesn't work this way. People are basically interested in walking their dogs, then eating breakfast and moving towards the... Politics pops up in their minds only when it's when crisis occurs. So that's one. The second thing is that recent, very important, empirically sound and reliable data show that majority of people are not interested in politics.
But politics
Why?
is interested
Because
in them.
politics is a conflict. People avoid conflicts. They don't want it. They are not. They know very little. And here is the problem. There is another vision. I mean, we are very easy at criticizing politicians. But do citizens do justice to politicians? I can show you lots of elections in which fantastic governments were removed from power for no reason or strange reasons, like attacks of sharks in 1916. Woodrow Wilson almost lost his presidency because of
Maybe it's because
attacks
we're
of
changing
sharks.
politics into a television drama.
And secondly, it is crystal clear that people attach too much attention to short-term factors prior to the election, 3 or 6 months, and they tend to forget about the general big picture of the last 5 or 10 years.
But maybe that's the problem of the system, if I may. Maybe that's exactly why we are having problems with democracy, that we are sticking to the model of representative democracy that we have every 4 or 5 years elections, and that's only the time when politicians are interested in catching up with
And,
them.
and Claudia was clearly trying to disagree with
let me
Professor
finish.
Markowski and then Professor Konarski afterwards.
Yes, you are right, Professor, that people are maybe not interested in politics, but they are interested in what is happening around them. And if you think locally what is happening around you and with you, and if you are engaged, unfortunately only 20–30% of people in Poland are volunteering in some kind of organizations. But if more people would care what is happening around them, I think it would mirror itself in the politics. They would be more interested in what is happening on a higher level. I think this is also the way to do it.
Well, I do think that people are more interested in what's happening on a general level, but they don't always have the right answers. And there's also a lot of the misinformation or the ways that stuff is being described to the average citizen. And then on the local level, you have a lot of issues, a lot of problems, a lot of things, but you don't get interested as much because then politics is not about that. It's about a bigger conflict that we try to kind of envision for a country, whether it is the United States or, I don't know, Poland or whoever else. It's more on the general stuff. I think it was more about bread and butter in the previous years. We've tried to figure out a lot of more important things, less so on how to make people richer on an individual.
Back to what we started with.
Because this is something truly important. You have economic research on how you create inclusive institutions.
Talking in practical terms, not in academic terms, people are really fed up. We see that we are a minority. Not so many democracies in the world. If you look at the map of the world, the political map of the world, we see so many threats like the disinformation, rise of populism, new technologies. It doesn't look very bright, does it?
I think that the most important issue is that people are too easily seduced by some of those new elements in the dialogue, in the fact that the deliberative democracy is fading away right now because everything is done in a very automatic way. For instance, if you look upon some divisions within the societies, we are definitely witnessing the fact that very many people in the society are very tribal-like oriented.
For this system to get revitalized, Do we need a catastrophe, or do we need to see a process that leads to it?
I'm afraid that we are planned as the human beings to some of the catastrophes, I'm afraid.
All right.
Probably as a fossil here in this group. Let me
You don't look
remind
like one, Professor.
Well, I don't, but close to. Anyway, the point is that we, at the end of the previous millennium, the late 90s and the beginning of the new millennium, we were at the heights of democratic successes around the world. We were sort of, this was actually statistically a deviant period. If you go back into 70s in Europe, look at what was going on then. We are complaining about today's situation in Europe, but what was then? In Italy, 30% of a communist party, Berlinguer's communist party, financed by Kremlin. Georges Marchais' communist party in France, 20% support. Later on in Spain and Portugal as well. Plus, on top of that, radical right. Nazi, civil war in United Kingdom, all kinds of terrorism,
communism, terrorism,
killing prime ministers in Europe, Rote Army, in Germany, in Rote Brigade in Italy, etc., etc.
It's good to have this comparison. We see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Compared with the 70s of the previous century, today, well, what is it? Giorgia Meloni, we were expecting her to, dress in black shirts and march on Rome, and nothing happened.
All right.
A little bit more radical policies, but that's...
Let's put a full stop here. We'll continue in a moment. Just let's open it to the floor. Yes.
First one.
Lidia Stępińska-Ustasiak, British Alumni Society. We are observing how rapid development of technologies, artificial intelligence and other ones are impacting societies, economies, but also democratic processes. But unfortunately, in this global race, Europe is lagging behind. And at the same time, social media platforms and artificial intelligence are becoming one of the most dangerous dual-use weapons solutions. And are we able, as Europe, lagging behind in this global race, are we able to protect democracy in an effective way?
Right, okay, thank you.
Being exposed to the social media and AI.
Technology, yes, please. Professor Wawrzyniec Konarski.
I think the problem lies entirely in the fact that we are having a sort of the repetition of the same mistakes of us as a species. And you are absolutely right when you say that this is, this phenomenon we mentioned just is a sort of the danger for our further development. We are at the moment also as the voters much less subjective than it used to be before, as I said before. But nowadays, it is even more dangerous because we are not able, of course, to cope with those new inventions. And let me remind one very simple thing. Any of the mankind's inventions in the past, they have always been used in the wrong way, just exactly against the will of those who are the inventors. Therefore, I'm afraid that this fact, which is definitely known for us still as a mankind members, has to be a sort of the prerequisite how to overcome this bad tendency from the past of our species.
So
I don't think any tools
the question would be if this is a chance or this is a danger, the new technology.
I mean, they are
some
both.
of you say that that's a hope.
Just a short sentence, one sentence, remind you that Mussolini, Hitler and others came to power without all those technologies, right? It is not this technology. I don't buy the argument that this is this new social media, etc.
Yes, but Professor, we live in a different world. You said yourself that we live in a much more complex world. And the question would be, would an autocratic regime like China, using the advantage of having much better technology and innovation, be a real threat to Europe, to its political stability?
So far, it was us Europeans in the 20th century who proved to be the beasts of humankind. You know, it was concentration camps were not invented because you had technologies or something. It was human beings' ideas accomplished, right? So I would be very careful in bashing these new technologies because they have very positive effects and also they might have negative effects. But so far, I haven't seen a country that was so use this technology to the extent to encapsulate the whole society into how Stalin was capable of doing it or Hitler without this technology.
Let me just take another question from the audience and we'll come back to it. Okay.
Hello,
Can you please
everyone.
introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Muna Masawi. I'm studying international relations master thesis focusing on cybersecurity. My main question is based on disinformation and artificial intelligence for all of the panelists. How can democracies effectively combat disinformation without compromising the freedom of speech? And can a democracy function when the population cannot agree on a set of facts that's been caused by disinformation and artificial intelligence?
Sure. That's a great question. Who would like to take it up? Claudia.
Well, I just wanted to say that young Generation Z, got used to the short forms. So they read TikTok, messages on TikToks like our parents or grandparents were reading the newspaper in the morning. So it's not a discussion about the new technologies because they won't go away. We have to use them. Now we have to think in which way we want to use them. So,
but what about disinformation?
Disinformation.
Can civilized democracies that we consider to be civilized democracies in Europe really thrive or basically live on with this amount and this scale of disinformation?
Well, we have to fight with this information, and also technology which creates this information can also mark what is created by AI.
And how can you spread with the freedom of speech? That's another important value.
Yeah.
Professor.
The problem also is entirely devoted to the fact that an absolutely unlimited freedom of speech, which you know from America, may place on much better position someone who wants to accuse and not someone who is the victim. That's the case. So in principle, I'm against the First Amendment because I think it goes too far. And this is also corresponding slightly with this widespreading of the freedom of speech, which sometimes is, I'm afraid, overused.
Right.
However, I'm not able to say very openly, in very, let's say, detailed way, what might be the tools to overcome this danger.
Because it's a fantastic argument for autocrats to limit the freedom of speech.
We have to begin with the diagnosis.
The
diagnosis, we know it very well. I think we agree on the diagnosis. The problem lies, in fact, entirely in the tools. And tools, for the time being, unfortunately, have not been discovered.
But maybe we have to put a question about the role of politicians, because we just seen the data that people are not happy with the politicians. So what is really, what the politicians are for in the new age, in the new era? Do we really need members of parliament, for example? Do
Maybe
we really need parliaments?
Maybe we can vote in AI to make decisions for us. We can have AI making decisions as the central
voting
bank.
bots.
And politicians can also mislead us. A source of disinformation partly comes from the politicians.
But you know, it is always advisable to look at the context and always compare relative to what. You know, whenever I am attending a conference and somebody comes up with this innovative idea that, you know, parties are losing membership, parties are less important than before. Yes, true. But how does it relate to churches? Yeah? Isn't it a downslide? What about trade unions? What about other organizations? People, simply put, are less organized within organizations. And if you put membership of churches and membership of political parties, you will see that there is much more of a decrease in membership, in participation in churches than in political parties.
But they participate in the internet. They are very active in the
voting alone, as they say. Robert Putnam from many years ago.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
Jakub Greta, I'm representing Forum of Young Diplomats, and my question is how we can defend and how states can defend their citizens from disinformation, wrong usage of AI, trolls and bots and stuff like that.
All right. So
The
it
new
seems that
generation is really worried.
technology, yes, it seems that technology is the main point of concern.
Yeah, may I just say something? Because with all the, ChatGPT was shown to the world in 2023. We all started using it. There have been other companies that were developing AI solutions that have been available to the public. There are other solutions that each one of you in the audience or watching this show can use. But then there's been this hype. No jobs are going to be existing. AI is going to take away all the production or the work of programmers, software developers.
It's still to come, perhaps.
Yeah, it's still to come, maybe. But then if we're going to see increases in productivity that we never saw before, not even in the industrial age. And what happens? Yeah, you have increases in productivity, 3-5%. Like this is normal technological advancement, the creative destructions that Schumpeter wrote about. So you have new technology that's being used, and it does not shift anything that much in the economy.
Okay.
It's changed a lot, and I don't think that in any other systems it's something as fundamental as we see it publicly debating it.
I think,
yes.
one thing, I think that unfortunately, I mean, the autocratic systems may be more easy, of course, to cope with some of those new inventions, because within the democracy, the decision-making
They might be more effective.
Absolutely, it's effective and it's much faster. If it is faster, it means people may be deprived, of course, of the chance to be subjective. If they are deprived, they may accept it. The problem is.
Do you think that people? I'm sorry, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that people would be able to and eager to pay this price for effectiveness? Okay, let's forget about long and boring democracy. Let's agree on an autocrat in our country for the price of getting, a quick process. Effectiveness, efficiency, and all of that.
I do believe they will resist, of course. They will be ready, of course, not to be ready to accept. But it might be too late, of course.
Okay. Let me just one remark from our study on this 100,000 Europeans. The recent 2022 results show that in many countries, especially those who are problematic, decaying democracies like Hungary, Slovakia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, etc., significant part of the population is, I call it a shampoo theory of democracy. That is, most citizens are in favor of liberal democracy's package. They say that's okay, and on both sides. But as you move towards South and Eastern Europe, citizens of these countries are much more, they expect much more from democracy. And sometimes this is the first real problem why they are dissatisfied with it. At the same time, they also allow that there is authoritarian leader that is above the law, a part of the population. So, basically what they say is, let's have a liberal democracy, but why not have on top of that a little bit of an authoritarian leader, just in case,
Exactly.
In case something happens. Because when we ask details about when are you in a position to allow for some kind of restrictions on democracy, then, of course, immediately what comes out is either COVID or all kinds of challenges, that war,
we only have 1.5 minutes left, perhaps even less than that, but I just wanted to ask this question. Are you not seriously worried about the rise of populism and far-right gaining support all across Europe?
It is worrying, definitely, but I'm more worried that the center, let's call it center parties, still didn't figure out how to communicate with younger generation. Still, they just don't know how to communicate. That's it. As I said before, there are short forms. I know that, as I said before, that there are complex issues that sometimes cannot be written in a few sentences.
Can I ask you this question? How should they communicate with the young?
I mean, populists found a way. I mean, of how they should.
But it's easier if you come up with ideas that are just pleasing the audience.
No, it's not about the pleasing, but it's about really seeing what younger generation or what the people needs. Because populists are not. They are the information, their message is based on the vision and of what young people want, really want. You know what I mean? Really want. Not it's like, it's different when you say something like, I need schools for my children, but it's something different that I need to feel safe in my neighborhood and I need the communities to support me in order for me to go to work. So there's something behind. So what is important now is to really understand what really people need and then put it in a short form.
If I may just add to my first statement, the feedback doesn't work. We're unhappy. We don't see performance. Right. We want to have economic opportunity. We want to have growth. We don't want to have inflation. We want to have, I don't know, higher pensions. We want to have some other things, cheaper gas, cheaper energy. If you have a government that is not developing on those issues, it doesn't provide, I don't know, education and then the opportunity for the kids to have a good job in Italy, Spain, or anywhere else, how are you not going to have those people fed up and then vote those people who promise a different solution?
So we're finishing this part with an economic note, let's say. What is the fate of democracy, the future of democracy as we know it? Are most of us ready to give it up in return for other gains? These questions come up with almost every election result across Europe. And now a wrap-up of today's debate from our guest, from Dr. Ibrahim Ozturk from Germany, in conversation with Małgorzata Bonikowska.
Hello, good evening. I am happy to be with you here. Yes, I clearly follow the topic. You are discussing really gigantic issues. Unless an overall reform of the global economic system is reformed, I do not have any optimistic view of the future. It seems that we are witnessing the rise of techno-feudalism on the one hand, and the people on the other hand. Winners are the big corporations, and the losers are the citizens, and citizens are looking for a representative. And in such a vacuum, populist leaders are emerging. In order to take populist rhetoric under control, people should restore their trust in the existing system. But at the moment, I do not have such a tendency. Please think about the left government in the United Kingdom. Since that left-wing government was elected in the United Kingdom, we were expecting really encapsulated deep reform activities, but they couldn't touch upon the real establishment, and they are losing the ground.
So we are back with the leaders. You criticize the leaders again, but do you see any possibility of using new technologies? We have a lot of questions concerning AI. Do you think this is a good thing, this can help democracy, or it's really a danger and it will be leading towards disaster?
Personally, I think the rise of artificial intelligence and other technologies is not positive for the future of democracy. Please consider what happened after the election of Donald Trump, who cooperated with many technological giants, including Elon Musk and other big companies. Indeed, if you ask me, populist politicians are making arbitrage between citizens and the rising techno-feudals. And
so that's a new challenge to cooperation between the big tech and also, you know, big businesses and the politicians.
So in this game, the winners will be the gigantic corporations.
Instead of people, in democracy, the winners should be the people. Thank you very much, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Ozturk, University of Duisburg, Essen in Germany. Thank you, Małgorzata. Now, time for all of us to take another vote. Well, we've got the results already. Quite easy to count because the result is exactly the same, Małgorzata. Would you believe it? No. It's 26 against 74. That's the result. Well,
our fault.
Sometimes it happens in debates, sometimes it happens in politics. Europe, once the playground of very bloody wars, has grown to be the best place to live on Earth, largely because of its commitment to democracy and human rights.
Indeed, but it's clear that that cannot be taken for granted any longer. The question is, are people ready to defend democracy? And does it make sense to them at all?
Yes, are they ready to defend it while it is still possible to do it in a democratic way? Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us here. This was Warsaw Debate on TVP World.
You can find this and much more content from the region. Just follow us on tvpworld.com and on our social media.
And for now, goodbye. Thank you.